The other side of this coin is if we're going to take this stuff seriously, right, then we've got to engage in teacher learning inside our schools, right? And we've got to take the notion of teacher learning very seriously indeed, all right? And again, one of the nice things that was coming through from Trish's video was that, you know, this was a learning school, learning for teachers as well as for kids. And Louis' little talk about that I thought was just great. Now, how do we engage in teacher learning in a serious way which leads to school transformation? Now, one of the slides I showed you when we first met at the real start of the project, I talked about a sort of a structure for school improvement based around school improvement groups, which by and large we've taken on. And I think I showed you this slide as well, or talked to this slide about if we're going to engage in a whole school improvement program, these are the types of values we need to put into place, all right? And again, we've seen, you know, a taste of these flowing through the conversation today. And my guess is, as you look at that again, you'd find that completely uncontroversial, right? And my guess is now in your schools, if you showed that slide, talked around that to people, they'd be very, very relaxed about that, okay? We've gone past that, right? We agree with that. But it's also pretty rhetorical as well, all right? The action implications of that are a bit vague, all right? So and that's why people are relaxed about it, because it doesn't actually mean I have to do anything, right? So if I show you the next slide, we're sort of upping the ante a little bit, right? Because if you believe in the values I've just shown you, then this then comes on, I think, as the natural corollary. And the first one is the one which is pretty tough for you guys, is that if we're going to engage in teacher learning of the type we've been talking about, we really need to actually find the space and time to do that. Cheers, David. The sort of, this is where the notion of reciprocity comes in big time, because you can't expect the staff to grow and develop without you finding the space and time for doing that. And there are inevitably, even in such wonderfully resourced schools as yours, right, implications for doing that. How do we organize a timetable? How do we actually get the right staff people in the right place? You know, and you know, do we close the school on a Wednesday afternoon to enable staff to work together, etc., 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 etc. Yeah, well, a lot of schools do, you know, and I know that, you know, there are implications for that, but unless you do that, you might as well not even begin, all right, because you will not make a difference, all right, and that for me is absolutely critical, and that requires pretty tough decisions. Now, I can give you some examples of what schools have done, i.e. close on a Wednesday afternoon, but that may be completely inappropriate for yourself. Again, why don't we get a little group to problem solve around that, to actually develop a number of viable and authentic, and at times quite innovative or bold, you know, sort of proposals in that area, right? The others sort of begin to flow a little bit from that, you know. Are we going to use research to really help us, or are we just going to wallow in our own sort of views of the world, which often reflect the way we were taught rather than anything else? Are we going to be absolutely rigorous about focusing upon classroom practice and what this means for the youngsters? Again, we saw how Trish managed to organize that. I'm going to skip the fourth one for a second. We found that actually dividing the staff into triads was actually quite a helpful way of building a sort of a self-help groups inside the school. And often if you can get the triads to run across curricular areas or run across years, that really helps to focus the discussion on pedagogy rather than on curricular content. You know, instead of me as the principal observing these three teachers, I will discuss with those three teachers the observations they have been doing with each other and the evidence and the portfolios they've been developing from that. You know, that's about how you build that professional culture. But the fourth point there is another pretty tough one. And we can do all of that without really making a dint into a change in teacher behavior. Because we can study John Munro's books, we can have time for triads, but unless we can actually guarantee or ensure that people are transferring this knowledge into their behavioral repertoires, again, we're not going to get the impact that we want. And there's a lot of rhetoric about teacher learning. And I've got to tell you, really, that there's really only one way of doing this. And it's contained on that slide there.